Do the Houston Rockets need a point guard in order to run this system? And how does that affect how the team is constructed? I'm going to answer this question in this video. If you want to support the Chop Shop, make sure you stop by our merch store. We got great sales right now going on for Christmas. We dropped the price on a lot of items in there, pretty much dirt cheap. So stop by the merch store, pick you up a shirt, pick up a sweater, pick up a hoodie, pick up a mug. Just show support to the channel as we keep rocking with y'all and providing you this heat. Keep rocking with us and support our channel through buying merch at the merch store. So hit the Chop Shop merch store. The link to the store is going to be at the bottom of this video in the description. So check it out today. Show love to the channel. Pick you up some great merch, quality content, quality basketball, quality merch. Before we get started, we have to just kind of get some definitions out the way. First of all, the term traditional point guard is a straw man. A lot of people use that as a way to downplay the lead ball handler on a team. You don't have to be John Stockton or Chris Paul to be a point guard. And even the name point guard nowadays in the NBA is just that, just a name. What I look at is who are the lead ball handlers on these teams. So for this video, to answer the question of whether we need a quote unquote point guard, I'm going to change the term point guard to lead ball handler. And to do this, I looked at some NBA champions from the past few years and seen who were the players that were their lead ball handlers based on how many touches they had during the playoffs. And in these playoffs, I looked at the efficiency of their passing, looking at several measures to see how well they performed and what contributions did they make to help their team win a championship. So I'm going to go through 5 teams, not in sequential order, but based on the teams themselves, and try to answer this question of, does a team like the Rockets need a point guard or a lead ball handler to compete for a champion? The first team I looked at was the Golden State Warriors. This was the 2022 Golden State Warriors. Who just won the championship in the last NBA Finals. And obviously throughout their playoff run, y'all can guess, their main facilitator, their lead ball handler was Draymond Green, who led the team in touches throughout the playoffs for them. And this is the same for all the Warriors teams, pretty much. I'm not going to do the different variations of championships with the Warriors team because they've won so many championships, because one thing stays the same. The guy that they have given their keys to their offense to is Draymond Green. Despite having Steph Curry and all these other great players there, you know, he is not a quote unquote point guard like a John Stockton, but he is a very high IQ player. During the playoff run, Draymond averaged 6.3 assists, and on his assist, he was generating 16.6 points off of those passes for an assist percentage of 25.6%. That means when he was on the court, he accounted for 1/4 of their assists of the entire team. And here's the most important stat for these playoff runs for these lead ball handlers is the assist to turnover ratio, which Draymond's was 2.34. That means for every turnover he had 2.34 assists to make up for. So with Draymond being the lead ball handler for the Warriors, you all know how they like to run a lot of screen actions with him, get him into short roll situations where he gets downhill and is able to just pick apart teams by passing to shooters, cutters, and all the off-ball movements that the Warriors like to do. Once again, just to show that, you know, for them is their system that really relies on that post screener to be that main ball handler, capitalizing on the shooting ability of Steph and Klay. The next team we're going to look at is the 2021 champions, the Milwaukee Bucks, and their most prominent ball handler and the guy that led them in touches was Jrue Holiday. Now, obviously, Giannis is a player that facilitated a lot, but throughout that playoff run, Jrue was their de facto point guard / lead facilitator. And in that run, he averaged 6.5 assists per game, generated 16.8 points off his assists per game, and had an assist percentage of 30%. So, which is pretty much 1/3 of the assists for the team when he was on the court was generated by him. And if you want to see an amazing stat, I think he leads this group that I'm talking about in assist to turnover ratio. He had an assist to turnover ratio of 3.55. That means for every one turnover, he made up for it with 3.5 assists, which is a really, really great ratio to go through a playoff run that won a championship with. And as you know, the Bucks, their system is a little different with Giannis kind of being, you know, a lot of times the one that sets the offense, but Jrue was the guy for them that set the table. And once again, this is a guy that played a lot off ball. He does does get his runs on ball, but at the same time, he's a very efficient player on both ends of the court. And I think that's kind of lends to their championship run, having a guy like that could lead their team and not turn the ball over so many times and make smart plays. The next team on our list is the 2020 NBA champions, the Bubble Lakers. And obviously, this is an easy one to guess who their lead ball handler was. LeBron James in that run was just an efficient god and throughout the whole bubble. I mean, he averaged 8.8 assists throughout that run, generated 22.6 points off of his assists, which is the highest on the list. And he had an assist percentage of 42.1%. So he damn near was accounting for half the assists of the team when he was on the court, had a high amount of usage, and had an assist to turnover ratio of 2.19, which is about, for every one turnover he had about 2 assists for there. Not a terrible ratio for a guy that had as much usage and touches as he had. And obviously LeBron is a one of one, right? So this is not a guy that you could just say, I'm going to build a team and have LeBron on there. He's one of the greatest players in NBA history, and his play in big moments definitely shows for that. And one thing that he has that, even though he's not a traditional point guard, is the brain of all the great point guards, just like a lot of these guys on the list, like Draymond and Jrue. It's not even the position, it's just looking at his IQ. And LeBron is probably one of the smartest players in NBA history. I mean, there's been talks that he would be able to read defenses and defensive game plans in real time and call them out to the opposing team as they're playing. So this is a guy that, you really can't just say you're going to build a team like LeBron with the LeBron on there and say that, this is our plan. So you just chalk that up to genetics and him being a demigod. But yeah, he definitely is on the list as one of the lead ball handlers for a championship team. The next player we're looking at, and the next team we're looking at, is the 2019 Toronto Raptors, and their lead ball handler was Kyle Lowry, he's closer to the Chris Paul Stockton point guard, even though he is still a bit of a combo guard. Kyle accounted for 6.6 assists during their playoff run en route to a championship, generating 15.8 points off of his assist. He had an assist percentage of 26%, so about a quarter of the assists from the team were on him. And I had an assist to turnover ratio of 2.94, which is pretty good. So for every one turnover, he had 3 assists to make up for it. And Kyle, obviously, all around player, smart player on both sides of the ball, able to take care of the ball, make plays for his team, and not really shoot a lot. He was a guy that would have games where he would have like 12 points, 9 assists, like 6 rebounds, take a couple charges and things like that. While Kawhi, Leonard, and some of the other players like Pascal were able to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So he's a different variation of a assist than Jrue Holiday, LeBron, and Draymond. And I'm going to skip back a couple years because basically between LeBron and Draymond, they just kind of go back and forth with each other for 4 years of NBA championships. So we're going to go all the way back to the 2014 championship Spurs. So these are the Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, Manu Spurs. In 2014, they beat the Heat for their last championship of that dynasty. And for this one, it's kind of it's a group award because they were so close together in their amount of touches that they had that I had to give it to multiple players. There was not really just one play, even though Tony Parker had the edge slightly in a lot of their measures as far as touches and passes and things like that. It was really split down the middle between three-way between Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Boris Diaw. And if anybody watched the Spurs, you would understand why. Their offensive system was catered to ball movement and sharing the ball across just the whole team. So there wasn't one guy that was super dominant on the ball. So it was really just dispersed across the entire team. And I love their system. I love what Pop, to me, that's really what made them a dynasty, is kind of their style of play, that brand of basketball. So Tony Parker averaged 4.8 assists in the 2014 playoff run. Manu Ginobili 4.1. An underrated player, Boris Diaw, a great passer, was 3.4 assists during the playoff runs, and they total averaging 12.3 assists between them. They also created points. I'm gonna just do their totals between Tony, Manu, and Boris. It was 31 points off of their assists, with Manu being the highest at 10.5 points. The assist percentages for them as a group was 23%, with the highest being Boris Diaw. So when Boris Diaw was on the floor, he was generating about a quarter of the team assists. And lastly, the assist to turnover ratio for them as a group was 2.1, the highest being Boris Diaw at 2.69, almost 3. So that means when Boris was cooking, he would have about almost 3 assists for every 1 turnover, and the lowest being Tony Parker, their actual real point guard, at 1.79, with Manu being 1.83. Interesting team. If you look at the Spurs, obviously they had Tim Duncan, a lot of great players on that team, a lot of just secondary players, but the system, like I said, a lot of motion, running running through the post and cutting and you know, a little bit of triangle here, a lot of the off-ball screening and backdoor cuts that some of the modern NBA offenses kind of adopted, like the Warriors. This was an offense that was able to amplify the skills of all these players. And as I look at the Rockets right now, our two main ball handlers is KPJ and Jalen. KPJ having 5.6 assists and Jalen having 3.8 assists per game, and between them averaging about 9 assists. You have them creating KPJ creating 15 points off his assists, which is pretty good. That's pretty good off of those passes that he's making, with Jalen at 9.4 for a combined of about 25 points off of assists between the two of them, which is crazy. If you look at it, LeBron in the playoffs was pretty much doing what they're both doing individually. From this, just looking at the historical view of these great contenders and looking at the diversity of types of players that they have, there's not one type of like lead ball handler that you need. That's my takeaway from this. It's not one type of lead ball handler. What you need to do is to figure out what type of team you want to run and play to that system, to the strengths of your players, right? And that's one thing I've noticed from a lot of these great teams and their coaches, is that they figure out what guys are good at, and it doesn't really matter what position you play. They will put you in position to use your strengths. And I think that's one thing the Rockets are failing to do at this moment with their guys. It seems like we're forcing guys to play to their weaknesses and which is causing detrimental things to the team, you know, and rather than playing guys and putting them in position to be successful. I think the best case scenario right now for our team, for this current Rockets team, is what the Spurs did. We're not the Spurs. Obviously, we don't have the IQ. We don't have the collective just playing ability. We don't have the collective greatness right now. But if you can imagine, you know, in the maybe 4 or 5 years from now, with some of the talent that we have on the roster, you know, we have some of the things that they had as far as just the archetypes. You know, I'm looking at a Tony Parker, which is an off guard. You know, we might not have that off guard point guard right now, but maybe that's something that we could draft or sign in free agency. You're looking at a Manu Ginobili, who was a guy that was a scorer. Maybe that's your Kevin Porter Jr. You're looking at your Boris Diaw, who was a guy that they slotted playing forward and center, and he would guard small forwards, he would guard bigs. He played a lot in the post as a mid-post player, a lot of face-up, not really a back-to-the-basket post player. You know, a guy that was, you know, riddled with conditioning issues his whole career. Was said that he was too slow, too short, too undersized. What does that sound like? A player to me? That sounds like Alperen Sengun. The only difference is Boris Diaw came in the league at 22. Alp came in as a baby at 19. So you can see how a player like Boris Diaw could lead them in the playoffs in assist percentage and assist to turnover ratio. He was a gifted passer, and in the Spurs system, he was able to be put in position to use his passing abilities and not just told because he couldn't shoot or because he wasn't a great athlete he shouldn't play. It just all comes down to imagination, you know what I mean? So for the Rockets, you're looking at a Tim Duncan, a dominant defensive player. Obviously, you want to translate that into the modern era. I'm thinking maybe he won't be as great as Tim Duncan, but if Jabari can be an all defensive player one day, a guy that you see flashes of him in the mid post, in the high post, able to shoot over smaller guys, able to work that unguardable shot, where I'm thinking in a few years that shot will be a 48 to 52% shot for him, where he can put teams away in the playoffs. Y'all keep hearing me say that. That's his form of ISO. When you have that type of 6'11" guy that may become a 7-footer, that may put on 30-40 pounds and be as dominant in the low post and mid post and be a great rebounder and guard 1 through 5, then you're looking at a Tim Duncan type comp there. Like I said, not as great as Tim, because Tim's one of the greatest players ever, but I'm just talking about archetypes. So you have that. You have your young Kawhi type with Tari Eason, a defensive player that you can throw on your best player and allow him to make plays off of just energy and transition and score when he can here and there and be able to make some passes and cut for his teammates. And you have your Jalen Green, a guy who's the wild card of all of this, because the Spurs didn't have a guy like that in their system. You're talking about a guy that could get downhill at the drop of a dime, jump through the roof, come off screens and hit threes. He is the modern era of basketball in himself, because he's emergence of two different archetypes of player, the shooters and the athletes. So you're looking at all of this and all these dynamic and diverse type of players. I don't want to slot them into a specific style that just forces them to depend on guard play. All these teams that I'm looking at, whether it's the Milwaukee Bucks, whether it's the Warriors, the Spurs, whether it's the Lakers, they all had dynamic offenses that was able to maximize multiple players at once and not just be ISO heavy and just pick and roll heavy. These are a lot of movement screenings and different actions formations that they ran because they're coaches. Now that's really what it comes down to, their coaching system. Who are you looking at when you're looking at these teams? You're looking at a Steve Kerr, which a guy that came out of the pop tree. You're looking at a Mike Budenholzer, a guy that came out of the pop tree. You're looking at a Frank Vogel, a guy that's been in wars throughout the playoffs in Indiana, have seen different things and played against LeBron and went against all these great players. And his coaching staff with Jason Kidd on there, there's been a former head coach with Lionel Hollins that's been a head coach. So they had a great coaching staff there. You're looking at Ty Lue, one of the most creative coaches in the NBA. If you hear players and other coaches talk about him and his ability to draw up plays and be able to make adjustments in real time, he's probably one of the best adjusting plays between him and Nick Nurse. And speaking of Nick Nurse, you're looking at a Nick Nurse. What do I have to say about Nick Nurse? Nick Nurse is one of my favorite coaches in the NBA. This guy will scrap a game plan in the middle of a quarter and just go to something totally different. You're looking at obviously Greg Popovich, one of the greatest coaches in NBA history, if not a guy that developed a system that has spawned out throughout the NBA and become kind of the staple for winning. So this is another thing when you're building these teams, is that you have to look at the offensive system. Does it match the players? And that'll determine the question of whether you actually need a true point guard. In this system that we have, that we're currently running under Coach Silas, you do need a true point guard. You need a guy that can get downhill and make all the right passes, unless it's going to look ugly. If this is the system we're going to run, then the guys that we have right now handling the ball aren't the ones that are going to be handling the ball when the time comes to contend. And that's sadly the situation that we're in right now. If this is the current system that we're going to run, if we run a different system, then you could see some of these guys being able to be maximized in other areas of their game, whether it's the ability for Kevin Porter to score in isolation, the ability for him to be able to cut, to shoot, catch and shoot threes, the ability for Jalen to come off screens and cut and move and use his shooting and athleticism as a weapon, the ability for Sengun to be able to be a passer out of the post position and be able to read the defense from that position, the ability for Jabari to be a mid-post to high-post ISO player there and still stretch the floor as a dead-eye shooter and be a great defender, the ability for Tari to cut and score in different ways on the court, the ability for just all these guys in the young core to be able to maximize what they do well. These are the things that you want the system to be able to do. And for me, as objective as I am, and I try to be when in regards to Rockets basketball, no hate, no cap, I try to keep it just straight business. I'm going to say that with the current system we have and the current players we have, I cannot see this being what we contend with. So that's why I'm okay with everything right now, because at the end of the day, all of this stuff is just temporary. It's temporary because I know when the team is going to be good, either they're going to get better players to be able to play the system that they're in right now, or they're going to get a different system that is going to be implemented by a different coaching staff to be able to lead these guys to be efficient players that they need to be. Currently right now, this is just a team of talented guys that are just learning to play in the NBA. So the question, do we need a point guard? It depends. What we need is high IQ ball handlers. We need high IQ players that can play in a system that maximizes their strengths and their ability to play basketball. That's what we need. And until then, the Rockets are going to keep treading water, but which is okay. Like I said, we got the draft coming up. We have free agency, and nothing is ever set in stone. If y'all remember my other video, this is just the breaks of being a young rebuilding team. Y'all just hang in there, and as time goes on, all of these things will sort itself out. So I want to ask y'all, what do y'all think about this? Do y'all agree? Do we need a point guard? Do y'all want to see a traditional point guard come to the team and be the one handling the ball? Do you think that we have enough with the guys we have, with a few additions here through the draft and free agency in this system, or do you think we need to scrap the entire system and get another coach or another coaching staff in here that's able to maximize some of the players? I'm going to say that currently I think that their system is, for what they're trying to do, that's, it's going to look up and down. But for me, I'm looking ahead in the future. I'm going to go with the latter of what I said, is that in the future, I just don't see this being the group of coaches and the system that we contend with. But that's usually how it goes in the NBA. But y'all let me know in the comments. Y'all keep rocking with the Chop Shop. If you're not a member or if you're not subscribed to the channel, I really don't know what to tell you at this point. You really just don't like yourself, and you don't like being entertained by one of the best basketball channels on YouTube. Not even Rockets channels, basketball channels. So hit that like, hit the subscribe button, and keep rocking with the Chop Shop while we drop in this fire.